What is he like? How can we know? Your answer to these questions will impact your worship, discipleship, apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
You will make mistakes in life. You will even fail. It happens to all of us, no matter how qualified or capable we are. Take it from me. We all had our own methods of coping. I had my fair share of Chardonnay.
We're trying like the Dickens to treat the symptom without treating the disease.
We have devalued life, whether it's through abortion, whether it's the breakup of families, through violent movies.
The disease in this case isn't the Second Amendment. The disease is youngsters who are steeped in a culture of violence. Violence is commonplace. All we need to do is turn on the TV, go to a movie.
What we don't have is actual evidence of real collusion.
No evidence of actual conspiracy that we know of yet.
Collusion will be the last issue we've dealt with.
Wow, word seems to be coming out that the Obama FBI spied on the Trump campaign.
Well, that's a good thing.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. Brand new week of broadcasting here at Focal Point. It is the home of muscular Christianity on conservative Christian radio, and this is airing on the American Family Radio Network. I'm your congenial, convivial, and amiable, as always, host. Let's just jump right into it using a reading schedule that you can find and a prayer schedule.
Wait, before we get into that, we probably should throw in a little disclaimer.
Yeah.
I know you made a promise to your listening audience to never play a clip from Hillary Clinton.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We busted it.
I know. I didn't sign the contract. I didn't.
So that's Jeff's excuse. Jeff's excuse is, Brian, you promised this.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know you had nothing to do with that.
So Jeff's off the hook for playing the Hillary cackle.
Trouble
is, now the deal is you got to stay tuned because you have a chance to hear it again at the top of the second hour. So don't go anywhere. After the news break, it will be right back in all of its sonorous glory.
He confessed to being a bad boy this morning.
He was a bad boy with those intros. All right, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. We are in the story of Elisha, who was the successor to Elijah. Remember, it came down to the Jordan River, and Elisha asked Elijah for a double portion of his spirit. Now, people don't understand exactly what that means. A double portion was the way of identifying the heir. What the father would do, if he had multiple sons, he would divide up, if he had 5 sons, he would divide up the inheritance in 6 pieces and give 2 of the pieces to the oldest son, to the designated heir. The double portion was a sign that he was the heir. So when Elisha asked Elijah, I would like a double portion of your spirit, he's not saying I'm asking for twice as much of your spirit. I'm just asking for your spirit. I'm asking to be your successor. I'm asking for you to anoint me and bless me that I can carry on the work that you started, and that is what Elijah did. Now in chapter 4, which is where we are this morning, we've got Elijah who travels often through that country, went through a little town by the name of Shunem. There was a woman there who invited him to come in for dinner one night, and it was such a positive experience for both Elisha and the woman and her husband that they invited him to drop by any time he was coming through town, and then they built a guest house for him on top of their house on the roof with its own bed and a lamp and all that kind of stuff. So Elijah began spending the night there. It served as kind of a wait station for him. when he was going to and fro. And one day he said, I need to do something for this woman. She's been real nice to us. What can we do? So he goes to her and says, what can I do for you? He says, I got some juice with the king. I got some juice with the commander of the army. You need a favor? I can get you one. And she said, no, I'm just fine. So Elisha asked Gehazi, hey, what can we do for this woman? And Gehazi says, look, she wants a son, but she thinks her husband is too old to have one. So Elijah calls her in and promises her a son. And she's hesitant about this. She says to Elijah, don't lie to your servant. I don't want you to promise me a son and then I don't get one, because I really want one. I don't want you to set me up for disappointment. And Elijah says, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not giving you a false sense of hope. And sure enough, the following spring, she gave birth to a son just like Elisha promised. Now, I know that there are a lot of women that are listening to me right now who have not been able to conceive and bear children but desperately want to. And I know that there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of disappointment, there are a lot of tears, there are a lot of grief in that. I know a little bit about that because I was married to a woman like that for a number of years. Debbie and I suffered the disappointment of having miscarriages while other couples were having babies. And we're going to pray in just a minute at the end of our little study here. And I'm going to ask God for his power and favor to rest on every woman in the sound of my voice who desires to bear children of her own. And I cannot make any promises. God hasn't given me any promises. He's not told me what, if anything, he will do in response to my prayer. But the only way to get an answer to prayer is to pray. So that's what I'm going to do for you. So just open your heart to whatever God has for you when I pray. Now, there was a further disappointment for this woman because when the son had grown, he was still a young boy, but he was big enough to go help his father in the field. He had a brain aneurysm and fell down dead in the field. So they carried him back to the house, and she laid him in the upper room that she had prepared for Elisha. She went to Mount Carmel to find Elisha. He saw her coming. She fell at his feet. Elisha said, his guest was trying to get her away from his feet. Elisha says, leave her alone, for she is in bitter distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. So prophets did not know everything. God did not tell them everything about everything. He told them specifically what he wanted them to know and to deliver to the audience of his choice. But she complains bitterly to Elisha, look, I told you not to deceive me about a son, but you did. I had a son, the son that you promised, but now he has died and I no longer have the son that you promised. So they hustled from Mount Carmel back to Shunem where the boy was. Elisha sent Gehazi on ahead with his staff, instructed to lay it on the boy's face. It didn't work. Elisha finally gets there. He goes up to the room. He shuts the door and he prays to the Lord. He got up, laid himself out on the boy, felt the boy's body grow warm, but his life did not come back to him. So he got up again and he prayed as he walked around the house, one of the original prayer walking sessions we see in the history of faith. Then he went back up, stretched himself out on the boy again. This time he sneezed 7 times, and the child came back to life. Now, one thing about that, she was in distress because the very thing that she had prayed so fervently for, the very thing God had miraculously given her, had now become the source of her greatest pain. Now, that can happen to a woman who prays for a son from the deepest place in her humanity, or for a daughter. God answers her prayer, then the child may grow up to make choices in life that break the heart of that mother. So if you're in that spot, do what this woman did. Share your need with people that you know care for you and ask them to pray diligently and fervently for you and for your prodigal child. Again, I cannot promise you what God will do, but pray believing that God can do the impossible, even reclaim your wandering prodigal. So pray and see what God will do. Well, let's go to prayer. Sovereign Lord, I pray that with the assistance of your Spirit, the listening audience of Focal Point, I, my family, every man, woman, and child in this land, including our President, President Trump, I pray that we may imitate Elisha's example and truly be men and women of God. We see here that at times it was your pleasure to hide things even from gifted prophets. So may we accept that there will be times in our lives where your purposes will be hidden from us. I pray for those in our city and nation who long to have children but have been unable to conceive. I pray that out of your grace and mercy you will open their wombs and give them the gift of children. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Why does AFA keep harping on the dangers of the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why? It's because we've looked into the eyes of the mother of a teen suicide victim. Patrice Bright was mom to a normal, happy 14-year-old cheerleader dealing with the challenges any teenager faces. But her outlook on life was apparently darkened after she binge-watched Season 1 of 13 Reasons Why. Anna Bright chose to deal with her temporary teen problems with the permanent act of suicide. Several other teens and young adults have made the same choice after watching this show, which glorifies suicide. The American Family Association and others have pointed out the dangers of the program to Netflix. But, apparently motivated by money, Netflix has just released Season 2. Our hope is to save teen lives by getting Netflix to pull the series before another tragedy occurs. You can learn more and sign the 13 Reasons Why petition at afa.net.
But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. The Trump administration has announced a rule to cut funding to abortionists like Planned Parenthood under Title X, a program that provides $280 million annually for family planning initiatives. The rule requires a bright line of physical and financial separation between Title X programs and any program or facility where abortion is performed, supported, or referred as a method of family planning. This forces Planned Parenthood and others like them to disentangle themselves from abortion if they want to continue receiving these funds. They have to choose money or murder.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Good to have you here with us in the conversation. Got a column. It is up at afa.net. In fact, if you go to afa.net right now, real simple to remember, afa.net. That's our main website. You'll see my column right in the middle of the page. Title of my column, The Pope Commits a Grave Theological Error and Says God Approves of Sin. So that column's up right now at afa.net. Encourage you to read that. I encourage you to share that on your Facebook network. If you're on Twitter, tweet out a link to that column. Tweet out or share a link with your pastor, with your any kind of mass mailing list you have for your small group or your Sunday class or Sunday school class or something like this. Now, I want to be clear about something, and I will when we get to, I'm going to talk about it at the top of the second hour, but the Pope in this situation is completely out of phase, out of alignment with his own church. The Roman Catholic Church's statement on this matter of sin is right on the money, and I'm going to read from it when we get to the column. So this is not an attack on my part against the Roman Catholic Church. Don't misunderstand me. They're dead center right when it comes to the issue of homosexuality. This is a concern about the Pope, who is the spiritual leader of one of the largest segments of the Christian population on the globe, so this becomes a matter of concern for all of us. So I encourage you to go there and read that. We'll talk about it more at the top of the second hour. Now let's go to our sound bites, get started right off the bat. We've had these school shootings that have been going around, and here is Dan Patrick, who is a lieutenant governor of Texas. It's on ABC this week, and he's talking about, everybody's talking about how do we stop this thing? What causes these school shootings? And what Dan Patrick and then Ollie North is going to be my second clip. These guys get right down to bedrock about why we have school shootings. Where does this come from? What is the problem? And the answer on both parts is not taking guns away from people. Here's what Dan Patrick says is the ultimate explanation for these school shootings.
Should we be surprised in this nation? We have devalued life, whether it's through abortion, whether it's the breakup of families, through violent movies, and particularly violent video games, which now outsell movies and music. Psychologists and psychiatrists will tell you that students are desensitized to violence, may have lost empathy for their victims by watching hours and hours of video violent games.
Now, again, I don't know how much we can do about this as a culture. I think it probably would be appropriate and right to pass some kind of standard for how much violence is allowed in a video game and draw the line somewhere. It can be done. There's all kind of products that we don't allow on shelves because they're toxic. You get too much arsenic in a can of apricots, it's coming off the shelf. There's no reason why we can't do something which is morally toxic, emotionally toxic, mentally toxic, and psychologically toxic. And that's the kind of thing that Dan Patrick is talking about here. And parents, of course, have the ultimate responsibility to watch out for the kind of things that their children consume. Now, they can't always control that. You know, we had Patrice Bright on here last week, and she talked about her daughter, Hannah Bright, beautiful girl, or Anna Bright, beautiful girl, very talented, and she binge-watched 13 Reasons Why without her parents knowing about it and wound up committing suicide, propelled by that dark series to that end. So you can't always control, obviously, what your children are exposed to. But you know what Patrick says? Look, we have just devalued life. That's the ultimate explanation here. We place no value on human life. And he mentions abortion as the first thing. What does abortion teach a child growing up in America who's paying attention? Well, we don't value life. We can take the most vulnerable, innocent form of human life on the planet and shred it into pieces. So that's what they see about America. There's no real value that we place on human life. And that begins, as he says, it begins to desensitize them to violence. And the threshold between where they are and where they need to get to commit an act of violence is dangerously low. And that's where we are at as a culture. 3 school shootings in the last week. Where does this come from? You know, Dan Patrick says you've got the lionization of abortion in our culture, devaluing life. It's not sacred. It has no inherent value. We have violent video games that show people being mutilated and killed and murdered and maimed in all sorts of horrible, ugly, graphic ways. That desensitizes people to violence. And then you have the breakup of families, which is a tremendously dislocating impact on the life of a teenager. You know, I tell people all the time, your children are never too old. Let me back up. Your children are never old enough for you to divorce. I repeat that. Your children are never old enough for you to divorce. It's a myth out there that children are so resilient and they recover and they bounce back and that they're old enough to tolerate it. They're not. You know, my parents went through their divorce when I was 20, and it just shattered my world because I had no home. All of a sudden, I had no home, no place to go at Thanksgiving, no place to go at Christmas. It just shattered my whole world because I didn't have a family of my own at that time, and the one I had just got torn to pieces. So Dan Patrick says, look, this kind of thing, it unsettles kids. It can damage them psychologically, emotionally, mentally, and so that's part of the problem, the devaluation of life and the breakup of the family. I think Lieutenant Governor Patrick's right on the money here. Now here's Oliver North. Oliver North is the new president of the NRA, the National Rifle Association. Good pick in my judgment. And he weighs in already, just been president there for less than a week. And he weighs in to give his opinion about what the problem is that we have with school shootings. Let's listen.
The problem that we've got is we're trying like the Dickens to treat the symptom without treating the disease. And the disease in this case isn't the Second Amendment. The disease is youngsters who are steeped in a culture of violence. They've been drugged in many cases. Nearly all of these perpetrators are male. and they're young teenagers in most cases, and they've come through a culture where violence is commonplace. All we need to do is turn on a TV, go to a movie. If you look at what has happened to the young people, many of these young boys have been on Ritalin since they were in kindergarten. Now, I am certainly not a doctor, I'm a Marine, but I can see those kinds of things happening.
So Oliver North talking about people growing up steeped in a culture of violence. Violence is commonplace everywhere they look. You know, he mentions the drugging of our youth. I've got a story in the stack that I didn't have time to read before the show began, printed it out but couldn't get to it. It's about the overprescription of Ritalin and the appalling number of young people in our culture who have been diagnosed with some kind of condition for which Ritalin is supposed to be the answer. Well, it's not. You know, I think one of the problems we have, Dr. Dobson has been talking about this for years, is one of the problems that we have is that we have set up our entire educational system for the way in which girls learn and not boys. You know, this hyperactivity, that may be just normal for the boy under discussion. Maybe nothing nothing aberrant about his maturity, development, and growth. He may be a perfectly active, very happy, very energetic young boy. Yet our educational system rewards students like girls who know better how to sit still and learn quietly in one place. A lot of boys have a hard time mastering that. Well, here's the articles from U.S. News and World Report, usnews.com. And this is a new study that's sounding the alarm about the misuse of medication for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now, it says here from 2000 to 2014, there were 156,000 calls to poison control centers for people under 20 who were improperly exposed to ADHD medication. This is in the journal Pediatrics. Now, overall, the call volume increased by 60% over that period. Here's a quote from a guy by the name of Gary Smith, who's director of the Center for Injury Research and Policy at Nationwide Children's Hospital. As the diagnoses and treatment with medication of ADHD have increased in the U.S., these exposures have also increased, which means we really do need to pay more attention. And, you know, you look at some of the side effects, some of the possible complications of ADHD. The estimate of children and adolescents diagnosed with ADHD between 2003 and 2011 jumped from 4.4 million to 6.4 million. So the diagnosis is up. Parents want their children to behave. They want them under control. They don't want them to act out. And so they just go to the doctor. The doctor prescribes Ritalin. Now, these calls to poison centers, a quarter of them were for those who were intentionally abusing or misusing the pills. Almost a quarter of them, 9,000 calls, were related to teenagers between the ages of 13 and 19 who may have been attempting suicide. They're taking bigger doses, says Smith. It's resulting in more serious outcomes, and it's not infrequent. While the study only reported 3 deaths, all were tied to intentional exposure among teens, including one suspected suicide. So, you know, these medications are not, they're not consequence-free. They're not side effect-free, and they can lower the threshold for students between where they are in their frame of mind and committing an act of violence. So obviously it's an issue that the whole culture has to address. You know, I talked about the fact that back in the mid-'60s, the Protestants had a film office and the Roman Catholic Church had a film office, and you couldn't get a film out the door like the ones that we're seeing every day in our theater. You could not get a film like that out the door because the Protestant film office or the Catholic film office would grade it in such a way that they couldn't show it, and they wouldn't. They submitted themselves to the standards of these film offices. And when those film offices closed their doors in the mid-'60s, the Protestants did, Catholics did, virtually the same time. You know, you went from having Chitty Chitty Bang Bang in 1964 to having Rosemary's Baby by 1969, where a woman is giving birth to a child of the devil. So when the salt is removed, that's what happens. The darkness comes in, the moral corruption, the rot comes in. Focal Point, American Family Radio. We will be right back. Stay with us.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Last week, when the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the Amateur Sports Protection Act of 1992 in the Murphy versus NCAA decision, they lowered the moral bar in America. This decision allows the various state governments now to legalize sports betting in their states. Gambling corrupts. Gambling corrupts the government. Gambling corrupts the people, and in this case, sports gambling will corrupt sports competition in the United States. Why do you think the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, so vehemently opposed this Supreme Court decision? Because they know that with this amount of money involved, there will be tremendous temptation to bribe players, and for players to take the bribes, to throw games, to shave points, and it will not be fair, open, and honest competition. Gambling is the fastest growing addiction in the United States. And when something is legal, more people will do it than will do it when it's not legal. So, more people will gamble. That means more people will become addicted, and they will reach financial ruin and financial ruin for their families. This is a bad decision for America. Gambling is also a terribly regressive tax. When you have lotteries, for instance, there's an inverse relationship. The poorer the community, the more lottery outlets. The wealthier the community, the fewer lottery outlets. The people who can least afford to gamble are the ones who gamble the most. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brand new week of broadcasting here on the American Family Radio Network. Glad to have you in the conversation. Let's grab a couple of more sound bites. I want to turn our attention to the latest in this Mueller investigation fiasco. Now, here is David Brooks. This is clip number 3. He's a supposedly conservative voice at the New York Times. He's their like token conservative columnist. He's not anywhere near conservative. Leans left, but he is apparently a Republican, and he's interviewed regularly on the PBS NewsHour every week, and so he's a guy that's an anti-Trumper, doesn't have any use for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is too lowbrow for him. David Brooks is one of these smarty-pants intellectuals that think they're too cool for school, kind of like George Will and that type. So he looks down his nose at Donald Trump is what he does. But here's David Brooks talking about where we're at in this whole search for collusion. Some kind of, remember, collusion is not even a crime. A conspiracy against America is not a crime. That's one of the things that people are being charged with. It's not a crime. You can't find that in the statutes book anywhere. Collusion is not a crime, and conspiracy against the United States, that sounds like it ought to be a crime, but it ain't. It's not in our statute of the criminal code anywhere at all. So here's David Brooks talking about the Mueller investigation.
As for the collusion charge, we know there were many more meetings between the Trump people and the Russians than we thought before. There was a meeting in Trump Tower. And so there's clearly more smoke there than we knew before a year ago. What we don't have is actual evidence of real collusion, and particularly by an awareness of the president himself. That may be still out there, but that part we still don't have.
What we don't have is actual evidence of real collusion. Now, you're going to see a lot of chaff out there about meetings with Russians and all that kind of stuff. So far, there's no indication that anything inappropriate happened in any of these meetings. You know, General Flynn got cashiered for his conversations with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, but he was the designated director of national security or something, whatever his title was, national security advisor, I forget, but entirely appropriate for a man in his position to be talking to his peers in the Russian government. Nothing sinister about that whatsoever. And so they just manufactured something for General Flynn. I mean, it's an imaginary crime. They're convicting these people on imaginary evidence. It's, you know, what's going on is a crime. The crime is what's being committed by Robert Mueller and his team of assassins. They're not lawyers. They're not searching for justice. They're not looking for justice. They're trying to find a way to cashier Donald Trump, and that's what this whole thing has been about. And frankly, I believe that this whole Mueller investigation, every last bit of it, remember, we've talked about the stuff that the Democrats are trying to hide. So they knew, I mean, they were shocked beyond belief when Donald Trump won that election. They knew they had a bunch of dirt that they had to sweep under somebody's carpet, but they were counting on the fact that with Hillary in office, they could continue to cover it up. Nobody knew, nobody would find out the depth of Hillary's misconduct with the emails. Nobody would find out that President Obama was directing this FBI infiltration of the Trump campaign. Nobody would know how many names had been unmasked by Samantha Power and by Cheryl Mills. Had no right to do it. So anyway, they thought all that was, they were going to get away with it scot-free because they would be in charge of, they wouldn't all in charge of all the investigations and all that kind of stuff. Then when Hillary lost, it was a huge shock to the system. So what they are doing, and I'm convinced this is what it's all about. You want to get down to bedrock. The deal is they are trying to throw so much chaff in the air that's connected to Donald Trump that the American people will not even see that the real scandal, the not epidemic's not the right word, the epic scandal that we're dealing with here is from the Democrats. And what they have tried to do, what they have tried to cover up, what they've tried to conceal. Realize we have all of this pursuit for a year now. You know, Mueller was put into office a year ago, just a little over a year ago. We've had a year of this, no collusion, no conspiracy, no evidence, no anything. You know, Manafort's been indicted, but for stuff that had no connection with the Trump campaign. So the indictments that have been handed down had nothing to do with the campaign. He indicted these Russians. That was supposed to prove that, yeah, the Russians were in on this. So the Russians showed up in court, which Bob Mueller didn't expect. And they want to see discovery because that's what defendants have a right to. They've got a right to everything that the prosecution has to put on the table. That's the last thing in the world that Bob Mueller wants to share with anybody. So he's trying to stonewall them. I believe in the end he's just going to drop the charges against the Russians. He'll drop them completely, and his excuse will be, well, we just really can't prosecute him because we don't have an extradition treaty with Russia, and that'll be the excuse. But all of that was just about trying to create this facade, this phony sense that somehow Trump was involved and the Trump campaign was somehow involved in an inappropriate way with the Russians. And there is just absolutely nothing there. But that's what they're trying to do. You know, that's been going on for a year now, which means virtually since Donald Trump became president, they have been trying to hide the scandal that the Democrats are accountable for behind this facade of Donald Trump as an uber criminal. So, you know, the Inspector General's report is supposed to come out any day now, and I believe that could be a bombshell because my sense is this Michael Horowitz, the guy that's responsible for this, he might just be enough of a straight shooter that he is going to blow a hole in the Democrats' boat and the Obama administration, all their holdovers, all their deep state operatives going to blow a hole in that boat and sink it to the bottom of the sea. Now here is Mark Warner, clip number 4. Mark Warner is a Democrat. He's the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he's being interviewed by Jake Tapper. Let's see what he has to say about collusion.
I'm not going to comment about where we stand in terms of certain witnesses in our investigation.
Just to put a point on this, and then I want to move on to another question about the same subject. Still, as far as the public knows, no evidence of anybody in the Trump team accepting the offers of help, no evidence of actual conspiracy that we know of yet, that we in the public know of yet, and you're not willing to comment on whether or not you've seen evidence of that conspiracy.
What we're going to do in our investigation, collusion will be the last issue we've dealt with.
Oh, man. Collusion will be the last issue? What the heck are you talking about? That's all you guys have been talking about since Trump was inaugurated. Well, first it was Russia, Russia, Russia. Then what's it been since then? It's been collusion, collusion, collusion. What do you mean when you say, what we're going to do in our investigation, collusion will be the last issue? I mean, that's just baloney. So anyway, what's interesting to me, and I think what is significant about this, is, again, remember, you got all this chaff in the air about all these meetings that Donald Trump or his campaign supposedly had with Russians, and the offers of help supposedly that these Russians made, and Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper's not a friend of Donald Trump. He thinks Donald Trump is a bozo and a buffoon. He's no friend of Donald Trump. But he's talking to Mark Warner, who is the ranking member. He's the top-ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. And it's Jake Tapper and says, look, you have all these meetings with Russians, but so far, no evidence of anybody in the Trump team accepting the offers of help. So ignore all this stuff about all these meetings with Russia. Even Jake Tapper is saying, look, there is nothing there, and Mark Warner doesn't challenge him on that, doesn't disagree with him. Jake Tapper says, again, there is no evidence of conspiracy that we know of, none. This is after a year of all this kind of stuff, and you're not willing to comment on whether you've seen evidence of any of that stuff. Any evidence of Trump accepting offers, Trump team accepting offers from the Russians, any evidence of conspiracy against America, which is just a made-up crime, another one of those imaginary crimes that Mueller is pulling out of his rabbit's hat. I don't know, wait a minute. Rabbits don't have hats. He's like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Yeah, there you go.
A famous quote from Bullwinkle.
No, I like that. I'm using that. Pulling that out of a rabbit's hat. I mean, it's going to be like
rocket surgery.
Like rocket surgery. Yeah. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I like that. I like that mangled metaphor. I'm going to use it. But anyway, and then Warner's trying to say, look, collusion is going to be the last thing that we look at. When that's all they've been looking at for you, that's all they've been trying to prove, even though it is not a crime. We've played sound bites from Alan Dershowitz ad nauseum that collusion by itself is not a crime. So they're pursuing something that's not even a crime, and they're spending maybe $10 million in this first year. 17 of these high-powered attorneys, 8 or 9 of them gave money to Democrats. I think there was one on that whole group that gave any money to Republicans, and that same attorney gave as much money to Democrats or more as he did to Republicans. So it's just a hopelessly biased team that Robert Mueller has in place. Now here is clip number 5. This is an astonishing statement. We talked about it last week, but here is James Clapper, who is the former director of national intelligence, and he's talking here with Don Lemon. And listen to what James Clapper says would actually be a good thing.
Wow, word seems to be coming out that the Obama FBI spied on the Trump campaign with an embedded informant. Andrew McCarthy says there's probably no doubt that they had at least one confidential informant in the campaign. If so, this is bigger than Watergate. I mean, that is an extraordinary claim, and based on your experience, what is the likelihood that it's true?
Well, I think this is hyperbole. They may have had someone who was talking to them in the campaign, but the focus here, and as it was with the intelligence community, is not on the campaign per se, but what the Russians were doing to try to instantiate themselves in the campaign or to influence or leverage it. So if there was someone that was observing that sort of thing, well, that's a good thing because the Russians pose a threat to the very basis of our political system. And I think it's hugely dangerous
if someone like that is exposed, because the danger to that person, not to mention the reluctance of others to be informants for the FBI, and the FBI gains a lot of valuable information from informants.
So this is just ridiculous. You know what the Democrats were saying, because word began to trickle out that there was an FBI spy in the Trump campaign. And they kept saying over and over again, we can't tell you who he is, we can't reveal his identity, it would endanger him. Now everybody in the world knows who this guy is. He's a Cambridge professor. This guy's not in any danger of anything. We now know his name, and he was spying on the inside of the Trump campaign. This was an Obama deal. So as they say in the vernacular, stinks to high heaven. Back with your phone calls. Stay with us. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
Under God, an American Family Radio special celebrating our great nation and featuring the music of the Joyful Noise Quartet.
I'm just reminded today how this country was founded because there were Christians looking for a land where they could live out their Christian faith. We've been entrusted now to be guardians of this freedom.
Listen to Under God this Wednesday morning at 11 Central on American Family Radio.
Did you ever sit down to watch TV with your family only to turn it off because of bad language? TV Guardian is technology that mutes foul language in real time while you're watching television. TV Guardian was born out of the desire to watch a movie with the family without exposing children or adults to coarse or foul language existing in most of today's entertainment. The closed caption feature within all programming is used to look ahead, detect the offensive words, and mute them. Using simple level filters and subfilters, TV Guardian can be used to filter content for your family. Religious references in mainstream programming are often offensive, using God's name in cursing, so TV Guardian offers filtering for those as well. More information is available at tvguardian.com/dish. tvguardian.com/dish.
American Family Radio is grateful for the support of TV Guardian.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, and the number to call if you'd like to jump in, talk about anything we've talked about in the program so far. We've talked about medicating kids, Ritalin, ADHD, the cause of school shootings. We have talked about this ridiculous charade, as our English friends would say, of this Mueller investigation, which is designed to do nothing more than conceal the crimes of Hillary Clinton. Nothing more than to divert attention. Make this the big thing in town so everybody's looking at this. Nobody's got any bandwidth left to look over here what Hillary Clinton is doing. So the number again is 888-589-8840. Let's grab one more soundbite. This is Alan Dershowitz. He's our favorite legal beagle here to play soundbites from. This guy's a liberal, voted for Hillary Clinton, hardcore leftist, a former law professor at Harvard School of Law. And here's what he had to say on ABC's This Week yesterday.
There's one person that should be recused in this case, and that's Rod Rosenstein, because he's a witness. He's the main witness. There was never a need for a special counsel. Special counsel have targets. They're looking to try to find crimes against people. That doesn't serve the interests of America. America's interest is served by finding out the truth, the facts, changing the law, and making sure it never happens again.
Okay, well, that's Alan Dershowitz. He's exactly right about this. What is Rod Rosenstein doing directing this investigation? He is, as Alan Dershowitz says, the main witness. I mean, this is unheard of in legal circles to have somebody that you know may be the prime witness to be managing, overseeing the investigation. So Rod Rosenstein is going to try to cover for Bob Mueller. I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to cover for Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein is certainly not going to push Bob Mueller to investigate anything that would make Rod Rosenstein look bad or anybody on the Democratic side of the ledger look bad. I mean, that in it right there is just absolute corruption, that Rod Rosenstein has not been pressured to recuse himself. He has far more reason to recuse himself than Jeff Sessions ever did. And yet Rosenstein is still out there, apparently, putedly, directing this investigation. I haven't seen any evidence that he's supervising anybody to do anything. And as Dershowitz says, we don't even need a special counsel. If you want to find out the truth, appoint a bipartisan commission. The purpose of a special counsel is to find crimes. They didn't have one to start with. There's no crime that's specified that Mueller's supposed to investigate. That's what the law says about a special counsel. You've got to identify the crime that was committed by the person you're investigating. They can't do it because there isn't one. All right, let's go to the phones before I blow my pressure valve. Let's go to John in Spring Lake, Michigan. John, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what our children are facing. I mean, violent video games, obviously, bullying, things like this. I think back when we were younger and, we got bullied, we'd go home and we'd have our place to kind of relax and get away from it. And nowadays, kids go home and they're still on social media and they're being teased 24/7 as opposed to, you know what I mean? And it might be something parents need to think about, like limiting the use of social media until maybe an older age or something. But I just feel like that's a contributing factor to it, where these kids don't have any place to go away from it all. It's just constant on them. And I think social media is a problem. I think that's a big problem for that, and it just keeps the kids separated from each other too.
Yeah, that's an outstanding point, John. Talk about the impact of social media. I've been reading numerous studies that when especially young people, teenagers, are involved too much on social media, they become more isolated, they become more depressed, again, because they go on social media and they see all of the people that they know living this fun, happy, exotic lifestyle, doing exotic things, going to exotic parties that they were not invited to. They know these people, but these people didn't invite them to their parties. And so they just feel out of touch. They feel neglected. They feel rejected. It makes them depressed. And like you say, you're right, John, they cannot get away with it. Kids are addicted to this social media today, so they're going to look it up. And they're going to check out their account. They want to see if they're being noticed, whatever. So there's no way you can keep them away from it, and it's a toxic thing in our culture.
These kids can hide behind that keyboard or that screen and say stuff that they would never say to somebody's face.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, when you have a face-to-face, there's a real situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they give themselves permission to say things like Rob has pointed out on social media they'd never say to somebody face-to-face. Well, John, that's an outstanding call. Thank you for that. Let's go to Jim in Spring Hill, Florida. Jim, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
I don't think that you're going to be really happy with what I want to say.
Hit me.
I mull it over in my mind a whole bunch of times, and Mueller is not Mueller. He's Mueller.
Oh.
Please call him. Please call him Mueller,
well,
and then we won't think he's an American.
Okay. All right. Well, it's interesting. That's the way he pronounces it, so I guess that's what we're going to have to do. I like your point there. And there was a third baseman for the San Francisco Giants. Same deal, spells his name the same, and I think he pronounced his name Miller. This is just obviously the German version of Miller. Miller is Mueller or Mueller, as our new friend Jim would say. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Let's grab a call from David, Lafayette, Louisiana. David, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. This morning I was listening to comments being made by one of the people on council, talking about the supposed mole, that was infiltrated Trump's campaign. He said that he hasn't seen or was given any information on this. So this sounds like an Obamacare moment. How stupid are we as Americans to believe what this man is telling us? He wasn't given information or seen in information? Of course not. They're hiding this just like everything else.
Yeah. Well, you know, the other thing about this mole, I think his name is Stefan Halper, if I'm not mistaken. I may be mixing up the name here. But the guy that is the spy that they infiltrated into the Trump camp is a professor at Cambridge. So this guy's not in any danger of anything. And besides, what is he, what has he exposed that would create any kind of a threat to him? But it turns out that the Obama administration paid this guy $262,000 over the course of a couple of years to do whatever they were paying him to do, which part of it had to be spying on the Trump campaign. All right, thank you, David, for the call. I appreciate that. Let's go to Mary, Jonesboro, Arkansas. Mary, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, I want to know the comment you made about them investigating President Trump about his collusion with the Russians, and they were stating it was more about Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration. Who's going to charge them, or will they ever be charged with their involvement in all of this going on?
Well, Mary, here's the thing. Here's the thing to look for. The Inspector General has been conducting a lengthy investigation of the FBI and the DOJ. Every department, like the Department of Justice, and the FBI is a part of the DOJ, they have an Inspector General. His job is to be an independent, neutral, non-involved reviewer or supervisor or scrutinizer. And this guy has been conducting an investigation of the Department of Justice. This is the guy, by the way, that surfaced the emails that Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were sending to each other, where they say we can't afford to have Donald Trump be elected. We've got to make sure he doesn't get elected. If he does, we've got to have an insurance policy in that case. The Inspector General is the one that sniffed out those texts and revealed them to the public. So this guy represents a real danger to the left, represents a danger to all of the Obama holdovers that are in there. So here's the deal, Mary. Keep your powder dry until this Inspector General's report comes out, because I have the suspicion that this thing could be lethal to the Mueller investigation and to everybody on the other side of the aisle on this deal. All right, Mary, we'll see if I'm right about that. Let's hope so. Let's go to JR in Houston, Texas. JR, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian, God bless you.
Thank you.
Listen, I'm thinking that this whole Mueller investigation is just a way for the Democrats to get rid of evidence. There's so much evidence. They were expecting Hillary to get elected. There is so much evidence that could just throw everybody under the bus. And I think that Mueller and his team of attorneys are in there just shredding and erasing and doing everything they can to get rid of all the evidence they can get rid of.
You know, and I think you got a point there, JR. Let me give you one example of something I've been reading about over the weekend. We've talked about it before when it first came up. But there was supposedly a meeting that took place on January 5. James Comey was in this meeting. I think Cheryl Mills was in this meeting. There were a couple of other highly placed members of the Obama administration that were supposed to be in this meeting. I'm not actually sure this meeting ever happened. We haven't seen any proof that it actually happened. I would like to see some logbooks and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it was, I'm trying to remember who it was that memorialized that in an email to herself. That's a weird thing. She sent an email to herself to write down what happened at this meeting. I don't know if it's Cheryl Mills, maybe, who that was, or anyway, I'll remember at some point. Anyway, this meeting on January 5 was called apparently by Barack Obama, and he was going to instructed his staff, according to this email, that you got to pursue this investigation of Donald Trump. You got to do it by the book. I want this thing done by the book. I don't want you cutting any corners. I want justice done. You got to do this thing by the book. Now think about that for a second. This is supposed to be happening on January 5. I mean, Trump is in office in 15 days. What kind of investigation are you going to do in the next 2 weeks that you haven't been doing? So I think this was President Obama, if it happened at all, trying to get on record. Look, I told him don't cut corners, so he's trying to insulate himself from any blowback. Well, that's it for the first hour. We'll be right back after the news. Don't go anywhere. Stay right with us. Got more to come on Focal Point on American Family Radio. Be right back.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio. American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net. Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. President Donald Trump is putting new pressure on the Justice Department, saying he will demand an investigation of whether the FBI infiltrated his presidential campaign. The department is already asking its Inspector General to widen an existing probe to see whether there was any improper surveillance motivated by politics. A number of Never-Trump so-called progressive evangelicals have banded together and released a document they hope will draw evangelicals away from the president. AFN Steve Jordahl reports.
A cursory reading of the document called Reclaiming Jesus finds a lot that most Christians would have a hard time disagreeing with. Statement 3, for example, says they believe how Christians treat the hungry and thirsty and naked is how we treat Christ. Who could disagree with that? It's Scripture, for goodness sakes. The therefore, however, is a shrewdly worded attack on President Trump's illegal immigration policy. Alex McFarland of Truth for a New Generation says nothing in Scripture demands open borders and unsafe communities.
I pray that people will not be misled by the religious lingo sprinkled throughout this document and the either accidentally or intentionally crafted logical fallacies that permeate this very unsettling tome called Reclaiming Jesus.
Statement 6 says the authors believe in the Great Commission. Wonderful. But the therefore is that America First is a Christian heresy.
It's a misstatement of the gospel, and it's a misstatement of what patriotism really is.
Pastor Robert Jeffress of First Baptist Dallas says signers like Tony Campolo and Jim Wallace may be trying to lure evangelicals away from their support for President Trump, but it probably won't happen.
These never-Trumpers have very little influence over evangelicals as a whole, as seen by the president's continued high approval ratings.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
In world news this hour, Syria's military says it has retaken the last neighborhoods in southern Damascus held by the Islamic State group. The gains by President Bashar Assad's troops bring greater Damascus, including its far-flung suburbs, fully under government control for the first time since the war began in 2011. Venezuela's embattled socialist leader Nicolas Maduro claims to have won a new term following a contentious election not seen as legitimate by all parties. Fox's Evan Brown reports from Miami.
Venezuela's National Election Council says incumbent socialist President Nicolas Maduro has won re-election by a landslide 68%.
Gracias, pueblo amado de Venezuela.
But Maduro has been the target of critics who say the South American nation is failing. The country has been marred by deadly political violence, food and medicine is scarce, and the centrally controlled economy continues to run dry. Political opponents say the low voter turnout suggests Maduro's re-election is fake and should trigger a new vote. In Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
The principal of a New Jersey high school is apologizing for what he calls insensitive language on tickets for the upcoming senior prom. The tickets for the Cherry Hill High School East prom urge students to party like it's 1776 during the event at Philadelphia's National Constitution Center. Principal Dennis Perry says some people were offended, and it was insensitive and irresponsible not to recognize that not all communities can celebrate what life was like in 1776. In final news this hour, a few bad words are getting one NBA star in trouble with his mom.
After a lights-out performance in Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals, Steph Curry had reason to celebrate in-game as the Warriors came away with a 126-85 win over the Houston Rockets thanks to 35 points from the Golden State Star. Curry shimmying, hyping up the crowd, getting energized.
I already know. I blacked out.
And apparently while blacked out, he said a few four-letter words which not only caught the attention of the censors, but his mother Sonia. Curry revealing that his mom after the game sent him 2 clips of him cursing, telling her son she was going to wash his mouth out with soap. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
That is the news for this hour. Find more information at onenewsnow.com.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
You will make mistakes in life. You will even fail. It happens to all of us, no matter how qualified or capable we are. Take it from me. We all had our own methods of coping. I had my fair share of Chardonnay.
We're trying like the Dickens to treat the symptom without treating the disease.
We have devalued life, whether it's through abortion, whether it's the breakup of families, through violent movies.
The disease in this case isn't the Second Amendment. The disease is youngsters who are steeped in a culture of violence. Violence is commonplace. All we need to do is turn on a TV, go to a movie.
What we don't have is actual evidence of real collusion.
No evidence of actual conspiracy that we know of yet.
Collusion will be the last issue we've dealt with.
Wow, word seems to be coming out that the Obama FBI spied on the Trump campaign.
Well, that's a good thing.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Alert listener Walker Wildman emailed me that the email was written by Susan Rice. She's the one that wrote the email to herself on January. Well, she wrote it to herself actually after the inauguration ceremony. Inauguration ceremony was over, or at least the time for it had come and passed. So technically Donald Trump was the president of the United States at that point. And she wrote an email to herself after Trump was inaugurated, memorializing the so-called or supposed meeting that happened on January 5, where President Trump was just blistering them that they've got to do this thing by the book. And again, I still have seen no firm evidence that that meeting actually happened. I'm not saying it didn't. I don't know that it didn't, but I have not. I got serious questions about that, and I have not seen any evidence, convincing evidence. I mean, you got White House logs, you got all kind of places you could check. I haven't seen any substantiation that that meeting actually took place. I have a half an idea that Susan Rice just imagined it or created it out of her own active imagination to provide cover for Barack Obama, so Obama could say, no, we didn't go easy. Look, I told him, it's right here. I told him, you got to run this thing by the book. Okay, second hour. By the way, Barack Obama is asking Jay-Z, who is connected to Beyonce. Remember what Barack Obama did the morning after the Benghazi thing happened? You have 4 Americans, including an ambassador, who are dead in a hail of gunfire and worse from Islamic jihadists, Muslim killers. They're dead. Our consulate has been burned to the ground. And what does President Obama do? He jets off to Vegas to party down with Beyonce and Jay-Z at a party where champagne was going for $400 a bottle. That's the president and his concern for his diplomatic staff. Anyway, so Jay-Z and Barack Obama apparently are tight, and Barack Obama has, according to reports, been reaching out to Jay-Z and say, please tell other hip-hop artists not to meet with Donald Trump. We can't afford another hit like we took from Kanye West. That dented us, that hurt us. In fact, in the week after Kanye West tweeted his support for Candace Owens, who is an African-American supporter of Donald Trump, very vocal, Trump's popularity among black males doubled. It went from 11% to 22%. Barack Obama says we cannot take another hit like that or it's going to sink our boat. So we'll see what Jay-Z does to carry out the wishes of the former president. Now, what I want to talk with you about for the next few minutes, and you can read this column at afa.net. Go there. It's right in the middle of the homepage now. At afa.net, you can go and find this column. It's my latest column, and just posted early this morning. And the title of my column is "The Pope Commits a Grave Theological Error and Says that God Approves of Sin." Now, what I'm pointing out in this column is that Pope Francis, who has been wobbly on the homosexual issue from Jump Street, that he's apparently joined Lady Gaga in the Born That Way crowd. Read a story on the LA Times this morning. According to the LA Times, the Pope told Juan Carlos Cruz, who is a homosexual from Chile. Now, this was a man who was abused by priests. His sexual abuse was suffered at the hands of priests. And this is what the Pope apparently told Juan Carlos Cruz: God made you that way and loves you as you are. Now, if this is true, the Vatican's been asked, but they won't deny or confirm. And think about it for a second. If this is actually what the Pope said, you would think that the Vatican would be out there to deny this statement so fast it'd give you a nosebleed. So I think the fact that they refuse to weigh in on it at all tells me that it probably is exactly what the Pope said. And what this would indicate, again, is that the leader of the largest sector of the world's Christian populace is now taking his theological cues from pop culture rather than from the Word of God. Now, Cruz said that not only did the Pope say you were made that way, loves you the way you are, he said the Pope loves you as you are, and you have to be happy with who you are. The first half of the Pope's statement could possibly be considered biblical. The Pope loves you as you are. I think we need to accept people where they're at. We need to love them where they're at. But if by the implication of loves you as you are means that I'm going to be content to let you wallow in a self-destructive sin, that's not a biblical view at all. We may love people, but if we truly love them, we want to help them out of that mud pit and get them out of that pit and set their feet on a stable place where they can walk in obedience to God. But the Pope's not saying that. I love you just the way you are as a practicing homosexual. Now, the Bible is consistent from beginning to end, from Moses to the apostles, that homosexuality is not okay, but rather is a perversion of God's design for human sexuality. While the Bible's view is that we are to love the sinner but hate the sin, the Pope has modified that to love the sinner and love the sin. Now, homosexuality is a form of sexual deviancy because it so radically deviates from the revealed will of God regarding sexuality. Scriptures make it clear that any kind of sexual expression outside marriage between a husband and a wife is contrary to God's intention. Now, that includes adultery, sexual immorality, prostitution, pederasty, pedophilia, bestiality as forms of sexual activity that are utterly contrary to the plan of God for humanity. Now, we may have to finish this discussion on the other side of the break, but this is the point I want to be sure everybody understands. The official catechism of the Roman Catholic Church, this is what they want young Catholics to know. This is the catechism. This is what they instruct Catholic believers in. This is what it says, basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. That's the Roman Catholic Catechism. So the Catholic Church, its official catechism, right on the money. No problem whatsoever. It's the Pope that's gone off the reservation here. Again, this is not a criticism of the Roman Catholic Church. Their catechism is right on the money. But it's the Pope that's, he like I said, has been wobbly on homosexuality. Now seems to be wandering clear off the reservation. Be back with more in 2.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
The term price transparency sounds great, but should government mandate it? Think about why prices exist, and then ask yourself why there are prices for everything except medical care. When was the last time you asked the price of a test, a visit, a procedure? If you asked, why did you ask? Was it because you were the one paying the bill? The Medicare administration wants to require hospitals to publish their standard charges online. What price should they list? The inflated retail price, all negotiated prices, the cash price? Would it matter if they did? The only reason there's no price listed is because patients don't pay the bill. When that changes, prices will fall, prices will be posted, and as in any market, there will be price transparency.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Let me just finish up on what I wanted to say in my column. You can read it at afa.net. Should be right in the center of the page. If you go there, I encourage you to read this thing and share it widely. And again, I want to be clear. I've said it twice. I'm going to say it a third time. My criticism is not of the Roman Catholic Church. My criticism is of the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. I'm getting ready to criticize Protestants here in just a second. So give me a minute and we will balance the scales if that's a concern for you. Now what the Pope is doing here is he's not only in theological error to join the Born That Way crowd, he's also in scientific error. I'm looking at a study here, looking at an article, looking at the results, examining the results of 8 studies of identical twins. These studies were conducted in Australia, they were conducted in the U.S., they were conducted in Scandinavia, of identical twins. Now, these twins realize, and you know this, but they share identical DNA, and they were conceived and nurtured in an identical prenatal environment. So if homosexuality is genetically triggered, the concordance rate would be 100%, because that's the way identical twins work. One has blue eyes, the other has blue eyes. One has blonde hair, the other has blonde hair. So if homosexuality is genetically triggered, genetically caused, the concordance rate, that is, if one twin is homosexual, the other is homosexual, ought to be 100%, but it is not. Not even by a long shot. Worse than a long shot. I'm looking at an article here. Researcher Dr. Neil Whitehead, who did a scientific study or very careful scientific probe of these 8 studies, said this: because they have identical DNA, the concordance rate ought to be 100%. But if an identical twin has same-sex attraction, the chances the co-twin has it are only about 11% for men and 14% for women. His next statement, no one is born gay. Now that's your Fisher factoid for the day. Learn it, live it, love it. Identical twins, the concordance rate is only about 11% for men and 14% for women when it ought to be 100%. Now, what Dr. Whitehead says, I think, is exactly right. The predominant things that create homosexuality in one identical twin and not in another have to be post-birth factors. In other words, it's a matter of nurture and not nature. Homosexuality is generated by nurture. It is not generated by nature. They've been hunting for a gay gene for 3 decades now, not anywhere close to find it. In fact, a lot of the leading researchers have completely given up on thinking there's a gay gene out there somewhere to find. And by the way, the concordance rate is even lower among teens who are twins. Identical twins who are teens. The concordance rate is just 7.7% for males and 5.3% for females. So that's way below 11% and 14%. You know, and one of the post-birth factors, and I would think it would be the major post-birth factor, is sexual abuse. And remember, the homosexual in this story, Juan Carlos Cruz, was a victim of sexual abuse at the hands of Roman Catholic clergy, at the hands of priests. And I've talked about this before. This goes clear back to the 1960s. Remember, in the Roman Catholic Church, and it's still true today, priests have to agree to be celibate. They cannot get married and have families. They would be devoted entirely to the work, their work as priests. Well, understandably, there are a lot of guys that grow up, they get in the age where normally men would be enrolling in seminary, and they say, you know, I'm attracted to ministry. You know, we hear stories every day of people that intended to be priests. I mean, you know, Rudy Giuliani, I mean, one interview after another, they grew up intending to be priests. But they got to an age where I believe most of them decided, look, I want to have a family. I want to be married. I want to know the companionship of a wife. I want to be able to enjoy sexual intimacy with her. I want to have children. I don't think the priesthood is for me. So the Roman Catholic Church was having a hard time filling the rosters of priests. They still have a major problem with that today. In fact, I think they're going to be compelled to admit married priests here before too long, just for the sake of survival. But what happened is they lowered their standards and they started looking the other way when homosexual males wanted to join their seminaries and enroll in their seminaries. They said, well, we need men, and we're just going to pretend we're not seeing the danger signs here. And so you started having the ranks of the clergy in the Roman Catholic Church being populated increasingly by priests who were homosexual. And we know that homosexuals have a predisposition toward taking advantage of children and teenagers, pedophiles and pederasts. It comes with the territory for homosexuals. It's endemic in the homosexual community. So that's where these scandals of sexual abuse in the Roman Catholic Church came from. They admitted homosexual priests, homosexual men into their seminaries. They ordained them as priests, and then they were in a position to take advantage of vulnerable young men. And this man, Juan Carlos Cruz, may be an example of that very thing. Now, the good news is that homosexuals can, with the help of God's truth and God's power, redirect their sexual energies in a heterosexual direction. Paul said this about former homosexuals in the ancient Roman city of Corinth: such were some of you, but you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of our God, the Spirit of regeneration, which can take even our sexual desires and redirect them in a holy and godly direction. Now, I'm sure that the Pope knows that this verse is in the Bible. Maybe it's time for somebody in the Vatican to remind him. So again, that column is up at afa.net. Encourage you to read it and share it. So once again, the study of identical twins. I mean, just remember that the Fisher factoid of the day, study of identical twins, 8 of them, major studies, Australia, Scandinavia, the United States, 8 of these major studies of identical twins. If one twin is gay, the other twin is gay 11% of the time among males. 11% concordance rate. If it was caused by genes, it'd be 100%. So that is the Fisher factoid of the day. Do not forget that, because that is a factoid that you can use. Result of 8 major studies of identical twins. The concordance rate is 11% when it ought to be 100%. Pretty cool story here. I'm just kind of going through my stack here. Pretty cool story here from Washington Township in New Jersey. Here is a police officer that actually saved the life of a baby deer after its mother, its pregnant mother, had been hit and killed in Warren County. So the pregnant mom is lying dead by the side of the road. The police officer sees it. He performs a C-section on this deer at 3:30 in the morning, and they saved the life of the fawn. There were 2 babies inside. One of them survived and was basically adopted by the animal control officer that showed up. So anyway, that's a pretty cool deal. They were actually out there looking to remove a loose horse that had wandered away from its paddock. They wound up performing a C-section on a dead but pregnant deer. Anyway, let's go back and get back to kind of some of the main things that we want to address today. Let's grab clip number 7. All kinds of problems. This is Jackie Spire. She is a Democrat from California. She's on with Wolf Blitzer. Now, let's remember, before you hear this, I want to set this up. Remember that Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, generated $145 million for the Clinton Foundation. She arranged for her husband, Bill Clinton, to have speaking gigs where he got paid $600,000, $500,000 or $600,000 for delivering speeches in Russia. This was in Russia. And she did this in exchange for selling to the Russians 20% of our entire uranium supply. And as a result of arranging for the transfer of our uranium supply to the Russians, remember the Russians? Remember Russia, Russia, Russia? Collusion, collusion, collusion. Here's your collusion. And so anyway, Hillary Clinton involved in all of that. $145 million for the Clinton Foundation, $600,000 speeches for her husband. Now listen to Jackie Spire tell Wolf Blitzer what ought to happen with public officials.
But truthfully, what has to happen is Robert Mueller needs to make his findings available. And once that becomes public, the Congress of the United States has an obligation to evaluate those findings and determine whether or not there were impeachable offenses. So I would think from a congressional standpoint, that is our pathway. Certainly the judiciary system is different. If he were indicted, I think that it would have to be postponed until he was out of office, whether it was because he actually resigned or his term was up.
Now, that's an important thing that she says there. We will get to the direct quote about what ought to happen or what public officials ought to do. But, you know, this is a very, very important thing that she's saying, is that if he were to be indicted, it would have to be postponed until after he was out of office. This is a Democrat saying that, and she's absolutely right. Remember, we talked about this last week about the impeachment provision that's in the Constitution to hold presidents accountable during their terms of office. That's how Richard Nixon was removed from office by the power that's granted to Congress of impeachment. Now, what the Constitution says in Article 2, Section 3 is that a president can be impeached. He also can be liable and subject to indictment after he's been convicted and removed from office, but the implication is not before. So he will be liable. He could be liable to civil and criminal punishment, but not while he's in office, because we don't want our president tied up in civil or criminal court while he's got a country to run, and the impeachment is the remedy for that. It's only after that that he can be indicted. Jackie Speier knows that. The Democrats, however, universally seem to be ignorant of that constitutional fact. Be right back.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've seen God open up so many doors for us to help serve and love those who get affected by a natural disaster.
As the trees and the wind started crashing down around us, my wife was, of course, very diligently praying, Lord, please be with us.
Very simply, we do it because God commands us to love others.
I see these volunteers all as a gift from God.
And I'm just grateful they're here, helping out. It's a blessing.
If you're interested in becoming a part of what God's doing through 8 Days of Hope, please go to 8daysofhope.com, click on Get Involved, submit your email address.
I've noticed that whenever there's a time in my life when things might be a little gloomy, the number one thing that I can do is to go serve somebody.
And I would encourage anyone else to, it's worth it. Come out and do it next time if you didn't make it to this one, and the Father will really bless you in it.
Thank you so much for your prayers and volunteering with 8 Days of Hope.
Here on American Family Radio, this is David Wolin with Haven Ministries, inviting you to anchor your day in God's Word. Jesus once told a story about a young man who convinced his father to give him his inheritance early. He then squandered it with loose living in a foreign land and soon was penniless and desperate, not the outcome he'd envisioned. It's a story we should all be able to relate to if we take a step back and consider the reality of sin, our own sin. Whatever form it takes, sin never delivers on its promises. But just as the young prodigal found a forgiving father when he returned home, 1 John 1:9 tells us, if we confess our sin, He is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. Anchor Devotional can help you rest in God's promises daily. Try it out today at getanchor.com.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Promised you this clip from Jackie Speier, Democrat from California, talking with Wolf Blitzer, and she's talking about what the duty of public officials is once they have been elected to office. Let's listen.
And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there wasn't some side deal between the president and Michael Cohen for a finder's fee or something. It's all about money in terms of the Trump Organization and Michael Cohen.
Well, I want you to explain that, Congressman. What do you mean about a finder's fee? If, let's say Michael Cohen did get $1 million to represent the Qatari government, are you suggesting that he would hand over a percentage of that to the president?
I'm just saying, as part of the Trump Organization, which I guess he no longer is, certainly I think there could be some arrangement within the Trump Organization that any clients that he was successful in getting would also benefit the Trump Organization. We're just finding out now that the Qatar government is about to bail out the Kushner property in Manhattan. So, again, it is about the opportunities for these families to make money off the positions they hold in government, and that is a violation of our duty as being elected to office.
Opportunities for these families to make money off the positions they hold in government. Jackie Speier, do you mean like Bill and Hillary Clinton? And what about Mitch McConnell? While we're on the topic, Mitch McConnell engineered a $25 million deal for his son. Remember, this is how the Democrats get around, the Republicans and the establishment, Mitch and the Democrats, you got to press to find a difference there. But the point is, with the establishment, this is how they hide the fact that they're making all these sweetheart deals. They have the deals engineered between their offspring and these foreign governments, so they don't have to report it. Mitch McConnell does not have to report that his son has a sweetheart $25 million deal from the Chinese government, that they are sending $25 million toward his son. They don't have, and Mitch doesn't have to report that. So that's how they conceal that. That's how they shade that. But Jackie Speier just all up in arms about that. It's a violation of our duty as being elected to office. And remember the other deal with the Clintons. Remember they raised all that money for Haiti relief? Nobody knows where most of that money went. It's just flat out disappeared. There's no accounting of it. Nobody knows where it went. Nobody knows what it was spent for. And I'm guessing it wound up in a lot of people's pockets that are not entitled to it by law. Now, shift gears a little bit in the few minutes we have left. And, one of the things we've talked about frequently on this program is the wall. Building a wall. We've been talking about this since this program started, actually, not a new topic for us, 2009. I'm probably talking about this virtually in the first program back on July 1. By the way, coming up on our 9th anniversary, July 1 of this program. At any rate, Donald Trump campaigned on building a wall, and I believe that's why he was elected. I believe what he said about Muslims, that they represent a threat to our security and safety, and we need to build a wall. I think those two things are the things that got Donald Trump elected to office. Now, here is Jackie Speier saying, look, we might be willing to do something on the wall in exchange for something on DACA, but listen to the little poison pill she drops in that right here.
The president said he would support allowing those dreamers to stay in the United States and eventually even have a pathway to citizenship, but only if you in the House and the Senate approve billions of dollars to build a new wall along the U.S.-Mexico border and took other steps curtailing immigration into the United States. You're not ready to do that, right?
No, but I have said publicly before that if what we're doing is building a useless wall for a couple of years that we can then tear down, I'm willing to pay that price to make sure these DACA kids can stay in the country.
All right, Jackie Speier is saying, sure, let's go ahead and build a wall, but let's build it like out of Legos or something. So we get down the road 2 years, we can just go knock that puppy down and hand out the Legos as toys to all the children of illegal immigrants.
You notice they always throw in that DACA kids. Well, they're not all just kids.
Well, a lot of them are 30 years old now.
Yeah, they're adults.
Years old now. Yeah.
They sort of put that around.
Oh
that,
yeah, because it's got to all be about
after the heart.
Everything's got to be all about the children. All right, let's play one more soundbite. This is Kimberly Strassel. She's from the Wall Street Journal, clip number 10. She's the one that really broke the story about the the Obama administration spying on the Trump campaign, inserting a spy inside the Trump campaign. Now, what everybody's trying to say on the left is, no, it's just an investigation. Nobody was spying on anybody. This is just an investigation. No, this was a spy. There was no investigation here. You know why? Because there was no crime to investigate. There was no crime. If it's an investigation, there's got to be a crime that you're looking at. There's no crime, so this was a spying operation, inserting a civilian into a political campaign to spy on it. And here's what Kimberly Strassel says about it as she talks with Tucker Carlson.
Can you think of any time in history when this has happened, or when anyone thought it was okay for, by the way, the Department of Justice is being run by one political party, electronically surveilling, and then also spying on the leading candidate and nominee for the opposing party running for the presidency?
It's almost too big to get your head around. And you got to think that in any other moment, in the last 50 years, if this came to light, it would be considered a stop the presses moment. It would be a legitimate constitutional crisis and a scandal. People would go to prison. And yet this is passing almost without comment, except really on this channel and at your newspaper. Why?
Well, the mainstream media doesn't want to have to put this the way it is because they still want the Russia collusion narrative to be true. They still want a pretext to get this president out of office. And so people are no longer using standard measures.
You know, and their point is anytime in the last 50 years this were to happen, there would be a major investigation. This would be a scandal of immense proportions. But the left-wing media could care less about this whole deal. Now, one more clip before we go to the phones. This is a long one. This is Tucker Carlson's clip number 12. He's talking here with David Bernstein, who's the founder of the group Run for America. It's a pro-immigration group and all that kind of thing. And one of the things that they're talking about is the fact that people make generalizations about white people all the time. You know, we are demonized as white supremacists by virtue of the color of our skin. We're automatically deemed to be racists because of the color of our skin. We're automatically slandered as being oppressors because of the color of our skin. And Tucker Carlson has a really good question for this arch liberal. Let's listen to their interaction.
Are you comfortable making generalizations about other racial and ethnic groups that are negative? Any generalizations? Go ahead and try one. You just said that white privilege is real. No, I'm serious. If we're going to have the honest conversation that you're calling for, then I call on you to be honest and make a negative generalization about any other racial or ethnic group in this country. Go ahead. You got the floor.
I think that I see where you're trying to go.
No. You don't need to think anything. I'm asking you, will you make a negative generalization about another racial or ethnic group?
I'm not going to be baited into.
I'm not baiting you. I'm asking you a sincere question. Will you or won't you?
Here is.
Oh, the answer's no. Why?
Because Tucker, the reality is when we try and talk about and understand things that are going on, whether they're generations, whether they're groups of people, we make generalizations in order to have a conversation. Because of course, every single individual person is different. But you won't make a generalization except about no, hold on. I'm inviting you to make a negative generalization, as you just did about one group, about any other group. There are many groups in this country, and you say sometimes we generalize. I get it. You want to have an honest conversation. I get it. Let's do that right now on live TV. Again, why don't you make a single negative generalization about any other racial or ethnic group? And again, I give you the floor. I'll be quiet as you speak. Go ahead and do that. Well, look, I think there's a claim that can be made about the fact that there now in this country we have people who are benefiting tremendously from a huge move towards diversity and inclusion, quote-unquote, programs that are designed to prioritize people of other ethnicities.
Which people? Over people. I mean, be a lot more specific. No, make a generalization about a culture,
Latino, African-American and Latino people over white people. Be precise.
So, no, you're critiquing a program. That's a program that you're critiquing, and I think you're right. Critique the culture, as you just did white culture, whatever that is. But you're assuming it's real, so tell me, generalize about another racial ethnic group's culture.
Tucker, I think you're missing an important distinction here. You're missing an important distinction.
You're missing the important distinction, which is this only goes in one direction, and you bully people by making generalizations that are not strictly speaking true. And if you're not, on board with it, you're a racist, and then you get to attack those people. Because that doesn't apply to any other group, which is itself racist. Will you acknowledge that?
I see where you're going with this argument, Tucker, but I think the reality is that
that's the argument. I just said it out loud.
There's a group of people who have been systemically oppressed in this country for a long period of time. And those are people who are overwhelmingly people who are African American and Latino. There's a long history of this. You and I both went took U.S. history courses.
You're changing the conversation. What you did was you said it was okay to attack one culture, but it's not okay to attack other cultures. And I'm asking you why that is. An 18-year-old college student did not participate in Jim Crow, did not participate in slavery, is not most of the time knowingly participating in the oppression of anybody, but it's okay to attack that person because his ancestors did something bad, but that's not okay to do to other groups because why? You don't have an answer.
Look,
no one ever calls you guys on this, but I just did.
I think you're really missing the point here, which is that saying if you just because you want to say that someone is being criticized for the basis of what a culture is doing, that's racist.
No.
Collective
race guilt is wrong. It's racist to attack people for things they didn't do because of the way they look. It's really simple. You're on board with it. I'm not.
All right, so Tucker Carlson, I think, had the best of that exchange. And the takeaway there is collective race guilt is wrong. That's the last statement that Tucker Carlson made. Collective race guilt is wrong. Doesn't matter what the race is. Doesn't matter what the ethnicity is. Collective race guilt is wrong. And his liberal friend just could not seem to wrap his head around it. All right, we'll take your calls. The number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Talk about anything we've talked about on the program today. We'll be right back.
To sharpen the biblical worldview of Christians and to share the good news of Jesus Christ. That is the mission of the Christian Worldview radio program. I'm host David Wheaton, inviting you to join us this Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, as we discuss all matters of life and faith from a decidedly biblical perspective. The Christian Worldview, Saturday mornings at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, right here on American Family Radio.
As a group, millennials have more than $1 trillion in purchasing power, so you know businesses are watching us. By 2025, we'll comprise 75% of the workforce, so employers are watching us. Despite these positives, millennials are losing our faith, so we know Satan is watching us. Engage Magazine is for millennials by millennials, and it speaks to faith, purpose, and a closer walk with Jesus. Because above all, God is watching us. Visit engagemagazine.net.
Preborn is saving babies' lives.
My name is Omaris, and I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant. I felt that if I brought a child to this planet, that I could not take care of it, and I could not be mentally prepared to handle everything that comes with having a child. So I thought my best option was to have an abortion. And once I came to have my ultrasound and I heard his heartbeat, I could not have an abortion.
The Ministry of Preborn saves babies' lives through ultrasounds. When a mother hears her baby's heartbeat on an ultrasound, she'll choose life 80% of the time. To donate and provide for a free ultrasound to help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Focal Point. Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. By the way, I'll touch on this. I may come back to it tomorrow. But you know why Democrats are for unrestricted Islamic immigration? For one simple reason, 66% of Muslims, when they come to the United States, identify with the Democratic Party. 13% identify with the Republican Party. So their support for unrestricted Islamic immigration has nothing to do with not wanting to be discriminatory, has nothing to do with being so proud of their tolerance, has nothing to do with their desire to be inclusive or diverse. It has everything to do with votes, has nothing to do with compassion. They know that 60%, 66% of the Muslims that show up on our shores are going to vote Democratic. And they know that only 13% are going to vote Republican. So that's like a 5-to-1 edge they've got. So that's why they're going to support Islamic immigration. This is why they are working feverishly to get rid of the Electoral College. They're trying to get rid of the Electoral College. By the way, they've already got enough states that represent 170 electoral votes, have already made an official legal decision that they will give, if they can get over 270 electoral votes represented, then all these states will be in a compact. We are going to give our electoral votes to whichever presidential candidate gets the most votes. So basically, they're agreeing to throw away their electoral votes if the candidate that they choose did not get the most popular votes, did not get the most individual votes in the presidential election. So that's what they want to do. They want to turn the presidential election into a straight popular vote. Whoever gets the most votes wins. They want to scrap the Electoral College, and by getting illegal aliens registered to vote, they get driver's license, they get registered to vote. Illegal, they get registered to vote. That's what they want to do. They want to build up this roster of millions and millions and millions and millions of Muslim immigrants and illegal immigrants and immigrants of other ethnicities or different ethnicities, because they know they will vote Democrats. I mean, Hispanic immigrants vote Democrats 75% of the time. They're just virtually a lock. So that's why the Democrats are all about open borders. Nothing to do with compassion, ladies and gentlemen. It's about power. All right. Are we going to play one more soundbite, Rob? Yeah, let's play clip number 13. This is Andy Puzder. And what he's talking about here is the fact, maybe you heard about this, Seattle has imposed a $275 per head tax on businesses in Seattle if they're over a certain size. And it's all the money's going to go to help the homeless. Well, number one, it's going to drive businesses out of Seattle. Number two, it's going to make Seattle the homeless mecca of America. These liberals are just so brain dead, they just have no idea what they're doing. They don't have any appreciation for the practical outworkings of their policy. And Andy Puzder, former CEO of Kentucky Fried Chicken, or was it, it's Kentucky Fried Chicken. Here's what he had to say.
One of the reasons is they're in Washington is that Washington has no state income tax. No state income tax, and you can't have a county or a city tax. Now they're trying to put, as a way to try and generate revenue for their socialist progressive policies, because they spend very inefficiently. They're now putting this tax on a company like Amazon with 45,000 employees. If you put $275 tax on every employee, that's about $12.4 million from your bottom line. So if you move to a state like Nashville, Tennessee, we love businesses here, you'd save yourself $12.4 million to your bottom line just by moving out of the state.
All right, so what Puzder is saying, look, if you subsidize homelessness, you are going to get more homelessness. Seattle is going to become the mecca of everybody in America that right now is living in a tent on a sidewalk somewhere. And regressives always think they can change their tax policy any way they want, and people will not adjust. They'll just take it. Well, Amazon stopped building. As soon as this tax passed, they stopped building their new expanded headquarters. Now, I understand there's maybe some talk of lowering this total tax, and maybe Amazon is rethinking what they're doing. But they've stopped their expansion dead in their tracks, something that Seattle did not anticipate. Starbucks, by the way, letting anybody use their bathrooms. They don't have to buy anything. Starbucks is going to become the new homeless, the neighborhood center for the homeless. They're all going to migrate towards Starbucks. They can sit in there as long as they want. They don't have to buy anything. They can stay out of the cold. They've got a bathroom that they can use. So, I mean, again, these liberals have just no idea just how foolish their particular policies are. All right, let's get some phone calls. Let's begin with Kenny in Norman, Oklahoma. Welcome.
Hello, Brian. You're back on my list of favorites. You've had the courage to expose the Pope for promoting homosexuality. I thank you for having that courage, Brian.
All right, well, you are welcome. And again, we want to be sure that we're telling the truth here, about it, wherever wherever it was, wherever the truth falls, that's where we want to land. And I was very clear that the Catholic catechism is right on point. Nothing wrong with it. My beef is with the Pope. All right, Kenny, any last words?
Yes, sir, Brian. I want to give you a real quick challenge. Find Francis or John Paul or any other of the recent popes making the statement that the Lord Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and no man goes to the Father except through the Lord Jesus. I don't believe you will find Francis saying that. I do not believe you will find John Paul saying that. They are kissy-kissy, chummy-chummy with the Muslim world. You will not find the popes proclaiming that the Lord Jesus Christ is the only door to heaven. Thank you, Brian.
All right, Kenny, appreciate the call. Thank you for that. You know, and typically the position of the Roman Catholic Church has been that you cannot be saved outside the church, that you have to go through the church in order to be saved. All right, let's go to Antonio in Dallas, Texas. Antonio, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi, Brian. I just wanted to make a comment again about what the Pope mentioned about this homosexual individual who was born that way. And I have a testimony that over 14 years ago, the Lord delivered me from a homosexual lifestyle and bisexual lifestyle because of sexual abuse at a very young age, under 18. It sort of shaped me to choose that lifestyle. And at 15, I was introduced to a Catholic priest who was looking to mentor, quote-unquote mentor, and be a big brother to, you know, a young individual without a father, which I was a candidate for, and so inappropriate relations began. And I lived that lifestyle for a number of years, and I'm here to tell you that it is a very wicked, evil, depressing, drug-infested, sexually transmitted, disease-ridden lifestyle that I lived for a little while. All the while, the Lord reached out to me through individuals during that time in my life, and again, over 14 years ago, delivered me. I was married for a short while, didn't work out, but certainly am looking for a wife once again, should the Lord provide that. But I'm here to say it is possible to
praise
be
God for
from
that,
lifestyle,
Antonio.
be born again.
I appreciate that, Antonio. Thank you for the call, because a lot of people say what Antonio is talking about here can't happen. It's impossible. You're born that way. You're stuck with it. But Antonio here to bear witness to the life-changing power of Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. Antonio, thank you so much for that call. I appreciate that. Let's grab a call from Jacob in Mobile, Alabama. By the way, I got a text from the executive producer that apparently Starbucks is going to start locking their restrooms. I thought they can't. There's just no way they could keep that policy rolling for very long. You got to, if you're going to do what they do, anybody can come in and stay for as long as they want without. You're going to have people taking baths in there, so you just can't do that. So Starbucks is already backtracking, locking their bathrooms. I guess you got to get a key, but I think anybody's going to be able to get a key if they're going to be true to their policies. They have no idea. They might even kill their business. You know, because think of, you know, you get some of these larger cities, you get cold weather. I mean, it's going to be wall-to-wall homeless inside every Starbucks in town. Who's going to want to go in there and spend money? No place to sit down. You know, the aroma is probably going to knock people right out the door. So I don't know. I just, well, good luck to Starbucks. Let's go to Jacob in Mobile. Jacob, welcome. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Brother Brian?
Good.
Okay.
What are you laughing at?
I work with the homeless for about almost 14 years, so everything you're saying is absolutely true. I don't care how people feel about it. It is so true. It is so true. And you got to keep your sense of humor about the whole situation, because it's things that you can't control when you actually work like that. But my real topic was about the race thing. I think one of the biggest problems, and I'm going to just give you some little castor oil with this one, is that most, I could say most, but it's a group of black folks, and it's almost close to half, look at white folks as God, and they worship them, and they think, well, they got all the money, and we got to, you know, and if they can keep the money from us and all this kind of different thing. And once they get over that and really truly worship the true God, they'll really see that they have the ability to do everything that they've lifted up white folks to as gods to do. They can do it themselves, and they'll come to the realization, whatever happened in the past, I don't care how bad slavery was, we have to forgive, because the Lord said, if you don't forgive from the heart, I can't forgive you. And he had no caveat saying, except black people or except Jews. We all must learn to forgive, no matter how much we've been burned by one another or by other people. We must. It is biblical. He said, forgive from the heart, not from the head, from the heart. And then he can work in your life.
All right, Jacob, that's a powerful call. Great way to finish the program. You know, that's a great message. It's a great word. And, you know, you think about the number of very prominent blacks that had the kind of lifestyle, that the kind of upbringing that blacks complain about. Clarence Thomas grew up in financially deprived situations. So did Thomas Sowell. So did Walter Williams. I think Thomas Sowell is the smartest man in the world. They didn't accept that as a limitation. They fought through the restrictions. They took advantage of the opportunity that America gives to everybody, regardless of race, color, or creed, and became eminently successful in their own careers. That's it for today. God bless you. See you back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio. The God Who Speaks explores the evidence of the Bible's inspiration and authority through some of the world's most respected biblical scholars.
The Bible subjects itself to historical verification. It puts itself at risk of inquiry.
From the American Family Association, The God Who Speaks. Available now at thegodwhospeaks.org. Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.